It's been almost 2 years since the Netflix Magic the Gathering show was officially announced. Now, unfortunately, it turns out we're going to have to wait longer than expected to see the final product.
Magic. I am a wizard! History. I'm an old wizard! The magic historian. My bones hurt.
Greetings, owners of fine luxury cardboard rectangles. My friends, we are here to start a brand new week, and I figured it was a good time to delve back in and talk about the Netflix Magic the Gathering show, because it literally has been almost 2 full years since they made the initial announcement. That was all the way back in June 2019, and then I have to admit, it really does give me that vibe of time flies, because it doesn't feel like it was 2 years ago, but at the same time it also does kind of feel like it was forever ago. So the actual release of the Netflix show has been shunted back to 2022. Originally, there was a placeholder up on Netflix saying that the show was slated to come out in 2021, but unfortunately for all of us, we're going to have to wait till 2022. So I thought this was a good time to go over all of the information that we know about this Netflix show, because I have to admit, we're living in a time right now where lore and stories aren't really at their all-time high. They're not quite at their all-time low anymore, but the lore and flavor that goes along with Magic has moved up, and then we had this massive kind of fall off a cliff when Wizards of the Coast decided to somewhat discontinue stories, and then we had the whole War of the Sparks situation followed up by Theros and all these other different sets that had genuine storyline issues. And even now, with Wizards kind of returning more to focusing on lore, we're still only getting some articles here or there, like tiny little story-sized articles, it feels like, instead of full-on novels. So having something bigger that we can sink our teeth into, and obviously I'm speaking from the perspective of somebody who really cares about flavor and lore, right? That's a huge thing for me in Magic the Gathering. So for me, the idea of the whole Netflix show coming is like, yes, give me more to enjoy. Tell me more stories. Use the breadth and depth that Magic the Gathering has to offer. Traveling to all kinds of different worlds, involving all kinds of different magic powers and stuff like that. I definitely dig it. So, we're going to go over all the different details about the Netflix show since it's been a couple years. This will be a refresher for some of you. This will be the first time you're hearing about it for some of you. So, I'll try and go over all of the salient points. Now, the thing about Magic stories is there's a lot of potential, but it really does matter how you execute that, right? Like in terms of who you choose to have handling your stories. So from recent times, a shining star example of awesome lore is the story that was written by Brandon Sanderson, right? Wizards of the Coast essentially entered into an agreement with Brandon Sanderson where he was allowed to write a Magic the Gathering story. And basically, he's like, look, I'll do it for free for you guys if you let me write the story that I want to tell. And they did. So we got an actually really interesting story with a compelling character. Davriel is a really interesting planeswalker that I would like to see more about. So that's a prime example of a situation where you get a great result when you have great people working on something. Some of the other stories, not so hot, right? It depends. And in some cases, it's not always the author's fault, because I really do feel like Wizards of the Coast does a lot of decision by committee, where instead of allowing their creatives to have freedom, they have all of these different requirements where it's like, you have to do this, 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 you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this. And it's not based on serving the story, it's based on other corporate concerns. And I genuinely do believe that those kind of hobbles really do shackle production, right? So you end up with things that aren't quite as good as a result. So I'm hoping that with this Netflix scenario, they're going to be giving the people involved more free reign with what they're creating. Because in all honesty, some of the people who are involved with this project have really impressive resumes. For example, the executive producers of this Netflix show are the Russo Brothers, and they're responsible for working on Avengers Endgame, and more importantly, Avengers Infinity War. I don't know about you guys, but Infinity War, I've never been a huge comic book or like superhero fanboy, but Infinity Wars was one of the most enjoyable movies I've ever seen. And as far as superhero movies go, oh, it was so good. Like, everybody's just so enjoyable in it. They did such a good job with the writing, and you actually feel for the villain, where it's like you don't want him to succeed, but at the same time, it's like on a certain level, I'm rooting for you. Thanos in Infinity Wars was amazing. Like, that was so good. So these guys, the Russo brothers, are involved with this Netflix series, which really does add some hope for me overall. And also, from the information that they've given us, they're going to be targeting adults with this show, which, I mean, I take that with a grain of salt, right? Because you can use the phrase like young adults, but let's be real. Young adult, like, it's made for teenagers, and a lot of the time it's kind of like half brainless. Do you know what I mean? Like, stuff that's mostly targeted for young adults tends to be insulting in terms of they think that young adults are dum-dums, so they make stuff for dum-dums. I don't know how much that's going to affect the Netflix show. I really do hope that when they say they're targeting adults, they're actually looking more at the success of recent things like Game of Thrones. I guess Game of Thrones is somewhat recent, right? It's probably, 10 years old now? Either way, that's still relatively recent. Game of Thrones was a massively, massively popular franchise that capitalized very well on the fantasy concept, but was decidedly an adult show, right? Now, I can't speak to the last couple seasons of it because it went off the rails, but at the beginning, it really had a high-level wow factor. And there's a part of me that hopes that this Netflix show is going to be walking down the same kind of road. Now, in terms of the characters that it's going to feature, you can actually see right here, we have the promo image that they originally used back in 2019. This shows Chandra standing there. She's got her flamey hair, but cloaked in shadows or whatever. It's a pretty good picture. Gives you an idea of what you're going to be dealing with. The show is going to be focused around planeswalkers, and we're going to be dealing with contemporary planeswalkers, right? So if there was any part of you that was excitedly thinking, wow, maybe they'll go back to like old school lore like Urza and things like that, that's off the table. If you want old stories about Urza and stuff, you got to come over to this guy right here. Head on over to Fantasy Geographic and check out some of the old school lore videos I've been making, because those are off the table. In fact, in one of the interviews that was done with an employee of Wizards of the Coast, they specifically stated that when it comes to people who are really into Magic, like really enfranchised players, they said there's a real danger that what will happen is whatever point of Magic they started at is what Magic is to them and what this show needs to be. So if you started back in the mid-90s, then you expect mid-90s lore. Like, the example was specifically given for mid-90s players. So people like me, although admittedly, I didn't expect it would be Urza. Why would they focus on Urza and these old stories when they are in no way connected to the current product that they're selling? So expect to see more current planeswalkers, like whatever planeswalkers are the biggest, most popular planeswalkers are the ones you can expect to see rotated in the show, right? So Chandra, Jace, stuff like that, right? Liliana, those, like, if you think mainly members of the Gatewatch, which are the planeswalkers Wizards had already selected to be their whole, we're not doing Avengers, but I mean, let's be real, the Gatewatch was totally them doing Avengers. In fact, one of the employees from Wizards of the Coast described planeswalkers as superheroes with magic powers, which in one way, I mean, isn't 100% wrong, but it also doesn't really feel like an accurate description of Magic the Gathering planeswalkers. Maybe that's just how the company views them now. But either way, we're going to be dealing with contemporary planeswalkers, which brings you to the question of continuity. How much continuity, how much canonical information will be used in this show in reference to, like, what's going to go down? First of all, is it going to mainly focus on the planeswalkers that we know, and are they going to be the main characters, or are they going to be side characters where, for example, we all recognize Chandra, and Chandra will show up here and there, but will we have new planeswalkers that are specifically created for the show so we can follow them and grow? It's a risky move in one way because they're not established, although they can tie them to pre-existing planeswalkers we know. So it's risky in that move. However, if it succeeds, then you could end up with people who are far more connected to these brand new planeswalkers than they would just with the ones that they've seen in tiny little snippets of stories or just on cards, right? So there's two different roads they could go with this, and it's not clear whether the main planeswalkers we know are going to be the feature players or if they're going to be like higher level mentors, side characters that show up here and there. Do you know what I mean? So in terms of canon, they said that major points of story aren't going to change. And the example that they used was, let's say a main character has one of their parents die. That isn't going to change. So you've got a character, when they were a child, their parents' life was ended. That point isn't going to change. But they said, let's say they were 6 when this originally happened in the story we were already told. They might change it to 8 years old. And to me, those kind of changes to the details of a story are really insignificant. I don't think that, losing your mother at 6 and losing your mother at 8, they're both very devastating. It has a lot of emotional resonance. They don't need to stick that level in terms of, canonical or whatever, but also take this one with a grain of salt because Wizards is really well known for abruptly just changing how characters work, what they're about. That is established. We've actually seen it in recent times with Luca. When we first saw Luca in Ikoria, he was a bonder who didn't want to be a bonder. The idea behind bonders were that they make this connection with animals, and then they love their animals so much, they're bonded with them on such a level that they literally will make cosmetic changes to their appearance. So Luca was shown with the cat that he was supposed to be bonded with, and you would see that, oh look, he dyed his hair to match the tiger stripes, that kind of a setup. But when we visit with Luca again, this time in Strixhaven, however many sets later, now all of a sudden, Luca's bonding ability literally causes physical changes. So when he bonds with beings, it literally physically changes the features of his face, like his ears become pointy, his mouth can elongate. It is a complete and abrupt change and very noticeable. So bear in mind that while they say they will only make small changes, I wouldn't be surprised at all to see more significant changes, but according to what they're saying, there's not going to be that much in the way of changes from what we already know. And in terms of the whole continuity between current Magic sets and the show isn't going to follow current Magic sets. So let's say, for example, we're going to Innistrad like we are at the end of this year. The show isn't going to go to Innistrad at the same time as us. The show is going to follow its own storyline, its own trajectory. It will not mimic what's going on with Magic cards. However, the reverse can happen, where if the show is popular enough and makes enough of an impact, we could see Magic cards that are inspired or taken directly from the events in the show, depending on where and how those would fit in. So the show will be allowed to be its own beast using previous Magic continuity to a degree, building upon it with its own, but taking us off in another direction, which I like because it gives us more opportunities to explore, more stories. Hopefully we'll get to see familiar planes that we know, but also explore brand new planes, because Magic the Gathering has a wide array of places to go and people and things to see. So for me, there's a massive amount of potential because this show is an animated show. We have the possibility for them to do a lot of things. When it comes to putting real people in different situations, it costs more money. Animation is expensive, but the sky's the limit in terms of what you can do. You can really go over the top with it. So I definitely like that. For anybody who might be wondering if there'll be anything related to Earth at all, there will be no connection or crossover to Earth. Magic doesn't really have much connection to Earth at all. I mean, obviously, Walking Dead has its own Earth variation, but that's not canon in Magic. And before that, the only time that Earth ever really showed up in any way in Magic was the flavor text quotes on some really old Magic cards. So the earliest age of Magic cards literally has real world literary quotes, right? So that may make some people, well, is there an Earth connection? There will not be an Earth connection. The studio that's in charge of producing this is called Bardell Entertainment, and they're responsible for creating a number of shows and like animating them, including Rick and Morty. So I have to say, you've got the Russo Brothers from the Infinity Wars, you've got the Bardell Entertainment from Rick and Morty, you've got genuine talent here. The kind of flavor behind the series is supposed to be thriller, horror, drama, which does kind of make it feel like it might be a little bit more adult, you know, have some crazy stuff going on. Either way, I have to say, I'm very curious about what's going to go on with this series. That really wraps up all the information that is available. It'll be coming out sometime next year. So, we're done here. List of my top patrons, scrolling them by. Thanks for coming by, my friends. If you want to check out some old school Magic lore, there's a link on the screen to my lore channel. And if you want to check out some old school Magic gameplay, there's a link on the screen to the old Chandelar series. And, well, I guess it's not old. I mean, I'm playing through it right now. In fact, I'm probably going to do another stream today. So come on by and hang out over there. I've done almost a dozen streams this month, and you're missing out if you don't come chill. Goodbye for now.